Thank you very much. Welcome, welcome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the sold out, I'll say it again, sold out 2024 Inclusion Collaborative State Conference. It's wonderful to see a packed room with individuals who are committed to ensuring successful outcomes for all students. My name is Sandia Lopez, and I'm the director, the very, very proud director of the Inclusion Collaborative. And it is my absolute privilege to welcome you here today on this 2-day journey, perhaps 3 days if you were with us yesterday for our pre-conference. I'd like to begin the morning by inviting our interim superintendent, Dr. Hinman, to provide this morning's welcome. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Hinman.
Thank you so much. So I am on day 4 officially, and I've been asked to speak this morning. I wish I had more background about what your plan is today and for the next couple of days. I can only tell you that as an educator for 35 years and sitting in all the seats, I have the greatest respect for the special education teachers and those that work with those teachers. In my mind, there are 2 groups that are the hardest working educators, and sorry, I'm going to offend somebody in the room, special ed teachers and elementary teachers. Now, I'm married to an elementary teacher, so I'm obligated to say that, but early on in our marriage, she described to me her work day versus my work day, and it wasn't even close. I mean, getting there early, doing the parking lot, walking the kids to class, doing class, walking out to PE, walking to lunch, walking back, teaching 9 different subject areas was really tough. So I have great respect for everyone, obviously, but those particular groups. As far as a little hint, trick for your administrators or department leaders, with the same groups that always sit in the front and the same ones that always sit in the back, put 2 podiums in the room. And so no one really knows where the podium is going to go, because I always had a group that hid in the back, and we made that kind of fun. So I am going to read a script. I am not a script reader. I am a bullet point person and shoot from the hip person, but I think it's really important that the thoughts go out for this event today. So here we go. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 11th Annual Inclusion Collaborative Statewide Conference. I am Dr. Charles Hinman, Interim County Superintendent of Schools. It is an honor to welcome you to the 11th Annual Statewide Inclusion Conference. This year's theme, Inclusioneers Inspire, truly captures the essence of our gathering and the incredible work being done across our communities. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Santa Clara County Board of Education and their dedication to inclusion education. I believe we have 2 trustees online, Trustee Laurie and President Berta. So if you guys just give them a wave and say thank you, because obviously without board support, these kind of events don't take place to the caliber that they're taking place today. I also want to extend my gratitude to the executive cabinet team for their unwavering leadership. Cabinet members, if you would please stand so we can recognize you. Let's give them a round. Thank you. And I got to tell you, I mean, yeah, like I say, I'm on day 4. These guys are running circles around me. They are just working. I get home at 9 o'clock at night, and I'm still getting texts and emails. I've really never seen a place so dedicated to learning as this county office. I mean, I thought I worked hard. I can't keep up. They're really amazing people, so I think you're really blessed to have the support that you're getting. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize the hard work of the Inclusion Collaborative, because their dedication, opportunity is available to all of you. Will the members of the Inclusion Collaborative team please raise your hand so we may celebrate you? All right. I should have had you stand. Okay. As we come together, we celebrate the power of inclusion, an essential principle that enriches our schools, our students, and our society. Each of you, as inclusioneers, play a vital role in shaping a future where every individual is valued, respected, and provided with the opportunities they deserve. Your commitment to fostering inclusion environments not only empowers students with diverse needs, but also strengthens the fabric of our entire educational system. This conference has an incredible lineup of speakers, workshops, and discussions that will challenge us to think creatively, share best practice, and explore innovative solutions. I encourage each of you to engage fully, ask questions, and share your thoughts. Let's use this opportunity to inspire one another and reignite our passion for inclusion. And I will just add there that oftentimes, especially as a site principal, it just seemed like my special ed folks often felt alone. They just didn't seem to be an envelope into the staff as a whole. They would sometimes feel like they weren't getting the support, especially from the regular ed teachers, attending IEPs and doing the work. So I think that's really important, that piece about together supporting each other. And for the administrators in the room, I think be cognizant of that sometimes it's a lonely job. And, not everybody has to sit through hour-long IEPs, volatile IEPs, people yelling at teachers who are just trying to do what's in the best interest of their kids, attorneys making accusations. It's a tough run. And a lot of times regular ed teachers just don't get that. And I think if they did, I think we'd come a lot further in this. So just my little message for those of you leading those ships. So as we move through the next few days, let's remember our efforts today will have a lasting impact on the lives of students and families across the state. Together, we can cultivate a culture of acceptance and empowerment that transcends our classrooms and communities. Thank you for your dedication and for being here today. Let's make the conference not only a place of learning, but a celebration of our collective mission to inspire inclusivity in all of its forms. Thank you, and enjoy your conference.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, Dr. Hinman. All right, I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. SCCOE acknowledges and celebrates local and national Indigenous people and Native Americans, in particular, the Muwekma Ohlone tribe of Santa Clara County, as well as the Ama Hudson, Esselen, and Taman tribes, and their efforts to revive and preserve the culture, the language, and history of the first people of this region. All right, your favorite part, it's the housekeeping. I know you love this part, so let's do it. Housekeeping items. The closest restrooms are located you see that sign right there, just right out this door, make a quick left. So it's literally right here in the corner. It looks hidden, but that's the closest restroom to us from here. And then all gender restrooms are available on the second floor across the way, so the south building, which is that side. And it's right around the corner from the Oak Grove room. So if you see the Oak Grove room, you're going to look a little bit more forward and you'll see that all-gender restroom. There is a privacy room, a nursing mother's room, north building, first floor, and also the south building, second floor, right by that restroom that I mentioned. Lunch will be located just to the left of this room where you were hopefully enjoying breakfast. We have tables outside in the courtyard. You may eat outside in the courtyard, in the cafeteria, whatever you please. And we're really excited. We hope you get to enjoy the band with us today. It's our favorite band in the whole wide world, the Dream Achievers. So, give them some love and enjoy that entertainment. Okay, emergency preparedness. In the event of an emergency, we like to identify folks who are CPR first aid certified. Please raise your hand if you are first aid or CPR certified. Those around you, take a look. These are the folks you want to acknowledge if you need some support. All right, I knew that always gets folks talking. Okay, if you need assistance or you require any assistance, please notify someone from SCCOE. A wheelchair is available on the first floor north building, just right out here. And if there is an emergency today and we need to evacuate the space, we have emergency exits right here to the right where Michael is, our amazing photographer, by the way, who, took these put these pictures together, these poster boards that we have around the room. He designed them. He's amazing. He just happened to be where I was pointing. So those are our emergency exits. We will evacuate. We'll follow us, the staff, to Assembly Area 8, all the way in the back. You're just going to follow the big group. Please don't leave. Please don't go to your cars and take off. We need to account for every individual in this room because we love you and care for you so much. Emergency devices are available. They're located on each floor at the south end of the walkways connecting north and south buildings. We've got fire extinguishers, AED, and Narcan. Here is, I'm sure you can't see it from way back there, but this is our schedule at a glance. This event, as I mentioned, because I'm really proud, it did sell out, which means the sessions are going to fill up. And so, just be mindful of that. If you see a session that's full, we are going to be streaming that in the cafeteria, so you could use that space to watch sessions that are filled up, because we don't allow for standing room in the actual rooms. Our conference app, download the conference app for access to different features such as our agenda, our handouts, the ICSC challenge, which I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment. If you're on your mobile device, you can use this QR code. If you're using a laptop, you can enter that URL at the top there. And again, if you need help, just raise your hand and one of us can come and support you with that. I want to take an opportunity to highlight a new tool that the Inclusion Collaborative has just released very recently. It's the toolkit to support students with Down syndrome. The aim of the toolkit is to provide educators, school staff, and administration tools and information gathered on best practices for supporting students with Down syndrome in school communities. The toolkit is based on information that's gathered from various sources across the globe that have dedicated their work to disseminating best practices for students with Down syndrome from early intervention all the way through adulthood. And so we do have a session, a conference session tailored to introduce this toolkit tomorrow from 12:45 to 2 o'clock. And we have printed versions of the toolkit that we'll have available at those sessions. And we also have this available on our website if you prefer a digital copy. We're just really excited and we hope that you'll look at it and use it. All right, let's take a quick moment to thank our conference sponsors. We saw a lot of buzzing going around right outside of the room. A huge thank you to all of our sponsors who, without their generous support and contributions, we could not pull this amazing conference together. We have our Inclusion Champions, EPP, Santa Clara County Office of Education Educator Preparation Programs, First 5 Santa Clara County, Strong Start, our Inclusion Leaders, SVCF, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Lakeshore, our Inclusion Facilitators, Special Olympics Northern California, Lumio, our Inclusion Advocates, Cokley, and Grand Canyon University, as well as Real. So we have some new sponsors this year, and we're really proud and excited to showcase the work that they do, and please take a moment to visit them. Okay, with that, I am going to hand it off to Robin Stone, coordinator in the EPP program. She's going to share a little bit about what they're doing, what they're up to. Robin?
Thank you so much, Sandhya. And can we just acknowledge Sandhya Lopez and her team? The Inclusion Collaborative Conference is extraordinary, and we have folks online across the state. So thank you, Sandhya, for your leadership in this area. The Educator Preparation Programs is an accredited teacher credentialing program, and for the past 7 years has been offering teaching credentials in 3 areas of educator specialist credentialing: mild to moderate needs, extensive support needs, and early childhood special education. So we are very proud to sponsor the Inclusion Collaborative Conference this year, and we have utilized our funds from our $3.5 million early education teacher development grant in order to make spots available in this conference to early educators and the administrators who support them in schools around Santa Clara County. So thank you so much for being here. If you're an early educator, if you teach kindergarten, TK, California State Preschool Program, or preschool, could you please stand up? Right on. Thank you so much for being here, early educators. If you're an administrator who supports a UPK or a transitional kindergarten program, could you please stand up? Right on. Thank you so much for being here. We're grateful to you in what you're doing for our youngest learners. If you have folks in your community who are seeking teaching credentials, we are here for you. Our job is to help you grow your own staff. And we have a number of satellite programs throughout the state. We offer career workforce pathways advising. This is a free service. We also have a number of grants to support educator careers in wellness, school nursing, guidance counselor, as well as teaching credentials. As you can see here, we have a number of different scholarship opportunities for classified staff moving into teaching careers and for folks who are interested in careers in mental and behavioral health. We aim to support school districts and schools in offering a wide array of resources. We have our intern programs, including now this year, we've launched a multiple subject teaching credential program. All of our credential programs are 100% online. That's to accommodate working professionals. Our teacher credentialing program started out in offering special education credentials to paraeducators who are really busy during the day doing the work of supporting our students with special needs. And so an online program that meets in the evening really supports them in making that transition into a lead teacher. We also offer induction. So for folks who are clearing credentials in these key areas, and then we don't stop there. We want to help educators like all of you become administrators who hold inclusion, who hold these values close to your heart and can support schools in delivering on these promises. So presently, we support a wide array of positions through our strong partnerships with institutes of higher education, not only in Santa Clara County, but throughout the state. So please stop by our booth in the atrium out there and learn more about programs that we have that might support folks in your community. We also offer a teacher residency program, and there is information at our table about that. It is the fastest way for someone to become a teacher. In just 1 year, a person will work side by side with a master teacher and take their coursework through Teachers College of San Joaquin or National University online. Again, coursework online to support working professionals like all of us. We also have a classified school employee teacher credential program. This is a $4,000 per year grant that is supporting classified staff in preschool positions, in paraeducator positions, instructional aid, any of those positions in earning their teaching credential. We also, through our Early Education Teacher Development Grant, in addition to supporting Inclusion Collaborative, we are working hard with partner departments like CPIN, the California Preschool Instruction Network, the Inclusion Collaborative, as well as our own Early Learning Department, in order to offer an annual summer TK Academy to support teachers in understanding what hands-on, developmentally appropriate, inclusive practices look like in transitional kindergarten. We also offer a community of practice, and if you're interested, you can contact me, Robin Stone. There's my email address. And we have a lot of information about our mental health professional grants available at our booth. And here's key contact information. Jen Pender, one of my colleagues, is at the booth right now if you want to speak to her and get more information about our Ed Specialist credentialing program. She's available to connect with you. I am coordinating our teacher induction program as well as the various grant programs. And then our colleague Phil Morales is heading up our administrative services credential and our mental and behavioral health career pathways. So again, I want to thank you so much for your time and encourage you to visit our booth out in the atrium there. And thank you so much to Inclusion Collaborative for inviting us to present to you today.
Robin. As Robin mentioned, and I did not highlight this, many folks in here are able to come because of an amazing scholarship or the sponsorship of EPP. So just again, a big thank you for that. We're consistently supported by your program, making sure that inclusion is weaved in through every element of educator preparation. So we appreciate you very much. Okay. Quickly, some of you have already started, but I have a little video to show you. We want you to be here, obviously, to learn, to network, to talk with each other, and to be inspired, but we also really hope that you find joy in your time here together. Are there any Inside Out fans or people that are forced to watch Inside Out because they're chill? Okay, yeah, same thing. So this is inspired, obviously, this is inspired by that movie, which I have to say, I've been forced to watch it, but I also enjoy it every time. We'd like you to join the Inspire Joy Challenge and let joy guide you as you unleash your creativity. You'll have a chance to connect with fellow attendees and enjoy a variety of fun activities, such as crafting your very own memory orb. Ooh. Thanks. Thank you, Rebecca. Capture special moments at the photo booth and more. And you can join the challenge through the conference app. I'm going to put on this quick video. It's put together by our partner, WestEd. So we do a lot of work with them. They're amazing partners, and they're helping actually to lead the efforts on this fun challenge in finding joy. So give me a moment.
Welcome to the ICSC 2024. We are so happy to see you. Fall is here. Change is all around.
Are you ready? Of course you are. We're here for inclusion. We're here to learn. We're ready for the challenge. Connect, inspire, create. We need something else. We need a bit more joy. How do you find joy? Let's find it together.
2 amazing days.
20 ways to find joy. The Keynote.
Watch the display.
Build your own memory work.
What's an inclusioneer?
Head to the courtyard for some fun.
Create your joy list.
Share a testimony.
Keep an eye on the rules.
Hit the photo booth.
Why is inclusion important to you?
Try the game.
Find your joy word. Keep an eye on the app.
Help out my name, my identity exploration.
Don't forget the joy guys. With music and data.
So what is an inclusioneer? Visit the graffiti wall. Give us feedback.
Play your jam.
Visit the wellness corner.
Make a button.
Don't forget that memory orb.
5, 4, 3,
2, 1.
Let's go.
Have a great conference.
Let's inspire joy.
The most important part there. So yes, please, please, please take a moment to, give me a second. Take a moment to check it out on your app. They're pretty easy challenges and they're a lot of fun. And just right outside of this room here, the boardroom is where you can make your what? Your memory orb. Good. Have fun with the challenges. Okay. Last but not least, I just want to thank you, Dr. Hinman, for the appreciation that he showed. I want to just reiterate some of that. Take a moment to thank all the folks who have worked tirelessly to make this event happen. First and foremost, our Inclusion Collaborative team that I think they're out running around right now, but if we can give them a big round of applause, it's the best team I've ever been able to work with. They're so dedicated to this work. They're on the ground doing the work. Hopefully you've all met 1, 2, or 3 of them. Special shout out to Myra Montanez, who's hiding, I'm sure, right now, but you have all probably heard from her at some point during this, during registration or after registration. She is running around taking care of everything. So she actually, she runs this event. Also, I'd like to thank our custodial services, maintenance and operations, our public affairs team, our warehouse team, and then Fresh and Natural, where you will be enjoying delicious food, from whom you'll be enjoying delicious food. Who was able to attend the pre-conference sessions yesterday? Okay. Okay, big handful of you. So yesterday during the morning pre-conference session, I shared that our theme this year is Inclusioneers Inspire. And our hope is that throughout the conference, the conversations that you have, the knowledge you gain, and the energy you feel, you'll be inspired to push the boundaries and continue advancing inclusion. And I shared that perhaps one day, and I share it again today, we'll reach a point where inclusion is just so deeply ingrained that we don't really need to even use the word anymore. We grapple with that in the Inclusion Collaborative because sometimes it's a word that we feel like shouldn't really exist, right? These are things that should just be happening. So we hope that the next 2 days bring joy, are filled with learning, connecting, and most importantly, again, joy. With that, I would like to introduce you to our keynote, who I don't think she's nervous. I mean, she came in and she helped me solve a problem with my daughter, and we've never met. So I have to first thank you for that. It's my honor to introduce to you today's keynote speaker, Rebecca Cokley. She joined She joined the Ford Foundation in January of 2021 as the first U.S. program officer to oversee a disability rights portfolio. Prior to joining Ford, she served as the co-founder and director of the Disability Justice Initiative at the Center for American Progress. A 3-time presidential appointee for President Barack Obama, Rebecca served at the U.S. Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and at the White House, where she oversaw diversity and inclusion efforts in the first term. In 2020, she was awarded the Richmond Distinguished Fellow in Public Life for Brandeis University. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Rebecca has spoken at Netroots Nation, New York Center Comic-Con, Yale University, the Women's March National Conference, and she's given a TEDx talk. It's been a guest on MSNBC, and last week tonight with John Oliver. She was a Carl Pister Scholar at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she graduated with a BA in politics. She's the proud spouse of Patrick and mother of 3, and is currently working on her first book. Give a huge round of applause, and please help me welcome Rebecca Cokley.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Cokley. I am a white woman with a glorious abundance of freckles, shoulder-length red hair, wearing a green jumpsuit. I have achondroplasia, which is the most common form of dwarfism. I don't know Peter Dinklage. I emailed him once at the White House, and he wrote me something really snarky back. And so when the time comes that my book comes out, if you want to find out what Peter Dinklage said, you will buy my book. I am from the amazing state of New Jersey. Currently, I was born and raised here in the Bay Area. I was born and raised in Burlingame, where my mom was the ADA coordinator for College of San Mateo. So I grew up tagging along to a lot of conferences like this, and it's really nice to be back in the space. I go back and forth between disability identity first language and people first language. I see disability as not a condition, but also a culture. We have customs, we have language, we have traditions, which are things that are used to justify it as a culture. Also noting that some people use people first language. I will say, first and foremost, I do not use any euphemism. So you will not hear special needs. You will not hear differently abled. You will not hear differently gifted. Last time I woke up, we don't have teleportation. I don't fly, any of those sorts of things. I also use this language because it was chosen by the disability community. A lot of the euphemisms were developed for y'all, for non-disabled people who are uncomfortable with the word disability. And from a disability rights and justice perspective, that's really not our problem. That's something that y'all need to work on. And when I use disability, I use it because it specifically has a civil rights connotation. If I am denied access, it is because I am disabled, not because I have needs that are special. Disabled people don't have special needs. Our needs are the same as everyone else. How we access something may be fundamentally different, but our needs are fundamentally the same. And so I'm kicking this off, and the photo on this slide are 3 women of color. One is standing. She's got glorious pink hair and some great tattoos. There's one in a hot pink wheelchair, which is really funny because as a redhead, I hate pink, but I just realized I use pink as a main slide. Wearing striped sweater and pink lipstick, and another one wearing an off-white sweater, pants, and socks that look like they're sea otters wrapped in little pink blankets, I think. Sorry, I went to Santa Cruz, and we're the home of the banana slugs. They tried to make us the sea otters, and we fought back against that. It's something we take very seriously. Let's see, which way? That way, maybe? There we go. I want to take a moment. Well, first off, I want to thank the IC, the Inclusion Committee here. It is so wonderful to be back here and to be at a conference promoting the inclusion of students with disabilities. I grew up going to public schools. I actually found a picture of my middle school. It's part of my slide deck, and there'll be a reason why I show it, but also just like most school buildings from 20 plus years ago, it doesn't look anything like I remember it looking. I want to take a moment to welcome all the people with disabilities in the room. Because looking at this room, there's at least 20, maybe 25, maybe 30 of you. And it may not be safe for you to publicly identify or professionally identify. And I want to acknowledge that. And it's not fair that in this world today, as a professional with a disability, you're still forced not to be able to bring your whole self to the table. I also want to identify that one of the most important things for a student with a disability is having an educator or somebody in their that they interact with on a day-to-day basis in schools that's like them, that identifies with what they have to deal with. And one of the most lonely things, just as you might feel lonely as an educator working in this community, think about how the kids feel not seeing an adult like them. So I'm going to challenge those of you who are part of the community. Work on finding a comfortable way to self-identify, not just for yourself, but also for the kids. Because for me, I am where I am because I had people in my life who self-identified, and it made the biggest difference in the world. So as it said, who the heck am I? I'm a 3-time presidential appointee. I like to say I've had some of the best jobs ever. My first job, I worked for my Congressman Tom Lantos from San Mateo County. Following that, I ended up becoming a regional manager for Victoria's Secret. I managed Store 1 for Victoria's Secret, which is at Stanford Shopping Center. Managed Hillsdale. I managed San Francisco Center and Powell Street at various points in time. It was never one of those things where I was like, oh, I'm going to go work for the most visually conscious company in America. Instead, it was, I can't pass the freaking LSAT. My brain doesn't work that way, no matter how hard I try, and I need to pay back bills. But I will say, it was one of the most important jobs I've ever had. It's one of the reasons I continue to keep it on my resume, and people are always like, why do you have retail on your resume? Because I learned how to manage. I learned how to manage people. And once you sell underwear to somebody, you can quite literally sell anything to anybody. And so when people ask me why I was an effective lobbyist, it was because if you can say the word décolletage repeatedly without blushing, if you can talk about various forms of underwear, if you can sell underwear to multiple players on the 49ers back when they played at the Stick before they moved down here, which I refuse to acknowledge, then you can talk about pretty much anything to anyone with a level of comfort. Also, as a person with a disability, it was actually very helpful to be somebody who's so visibly recognizable in that sort of role. It meant nobody was ever able to steal my sales. I had the pleasure in 2020. 2020 was a historic election for the disability community. We had 15 candidates write disability platforms. It was the first time that that's ever happened in history. We had 4 candidates host presidential town halls on Twitter. And all of this was because of the pandemic. Because for the first time, the non-disabled political field was forced to engage the way disabled folks identify. And we are better organized than any other community online. And so it actually put us at a really unique advantage. And so, yeah, I wrote 13 of the 15. There were 2 I didn't write, and that's a whole nother story. Unlike 80% of people with disabilities, I am part of the 20%. Both my parents had the same disability that I had. My dad used a power chair. In addition to being a little person, he became paralyzed when I was a year and a half as a result of a workplace injury. Like I said, my mom ran the Disabled Student Center at the College of San Mateo. My dad ran the Center for Independent Living in Belmont. So I grew up with disability activism really being the family business. I am a massive AFOL, meaning an adult fan of Lego. I was just at New York City Comic Con and was lusting after the X-Men mansion, and I cannot wait for that to come out. We actually have a line item in the household budget of which I'm allowed to spend on Lego. I'm a massive fan of the Liverpool Reds football team, which is #1 in the Premier League right now. I'm very excited about that. And I'm a mom of 3. My older 2, I have a 14-year-old boy, a 11-year-old girl, and a 6-year-old boy. My older 2 have dwarfism like me. My youngest is really rough. He's unfortunately average like y'all. And I really don't know what my expectations should be for him. Because, I mean, he's got a mother who's worked at the White House, a father who works as a vice president for one of the biggest health foundations in the country. Like, what can you expect an average height non-disabled kid to do? Like, I really think, like, my hope in life is, like, maybe he could go somewhere and get a job changing light bulbs. Or, like, he could dust. Like, because you guys do that, right? That's what you guys do as average height people. He could work at a grocery store and get stuff out of the bottom of the cart that his mother can't reach. I like to say that because I really do like to flip the expectations around disability on its head. When I was pregnant with my youngest and we went in for sonograms, I had the same OBGYN for all 3 of my kids. And she is literally my ride or die. When I had my daughter, the anesthesiologist openly advocated to sterilize me. And in 2018, he literally, as she pulled the baby out, he's like, okay, well, while you're down there, why don't you go ahead and tie her tubes? Because people like her don't need to have kids. And most folks don't realize that it's still completely legal to involuntarily sterilize disabled people. There's a Supreme Court case called Buck versus Bell that allows the involuntary sterilization of disabled people. And I thought my husband was going to kill him, but luckily my OBGYN got to him first and threw him out of the room. And then when I had but it's real. And here I was, a woman of privilege. At the time, I was running a federal agency. I was a senior appointee in the Obama administration. And this man thought he had the right to say that people like me, families like mine, deserve to not exist. Then I had my last child, and I remember my OB and I sitting in one of the exam rooms, and the sonographer doing their magic with the wand and the gel and all of that. And I remember just deciding to mess with her, and I was like, "But his arms are so big." And she's like, "No, his arms are totally normal." And I was like, "And those legs? Oh my God, they're gonna kick through my what?" And she's like, no, he's perfectly average. And my OB is like, "I think you're having a giant spider." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm having a spider baby." And the poor sonographer looked like they were gonna cry. And they're like, "I don't understand what you all are talking about." And I said, this is how, I was like, the way you all talk about, I'm just talking about averages the way that y'all talk about disability. And it really requires us to think about what is norm? What is the norm? Which is also why, as a little person, I often refer to y'all as averages, because y'all refer to us as dwarves or the little people or whatever as more of an object. And so to me, y'all are objects. Y'all are averages. Hi, averages. Oh, no, wrong way. There we go. These are words by Sonia Renee Taylor, who is an amazing poet. And one of the things that she says, and I think it's really important to remember this, is we will not go back to normal after the pandemic. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. I think about this a lot. And partially because the disability community predicted the pandemic. One of the first things that was deregulated under the previous administration was nursing home infection control standards. And I remember a bunch of us disability advocates being like, wait, they're going after the infection control standards in nursing homes? Because it was required at the time by law that each nursing home have an independent infection control specialist. That was a full-time job. They were not allowed to moonlight. And when we look at where the pandemic spread, it was specifically because people were moonlighting across multiple nursing homes. Particularly, we saw this in Seattle and in New York. The pandemic was a mass disabling event, and it's still a mass disabling event. Our kids are still being impacted. We have kids with long COVID. We have kids who've lost multiple family members. And the reality is all of us that are adults have never made it a priority to take the time that we've needed as a country to grieve. And we're expecting kids to keep moving, and they're having a hard time. And we're having a hard time. But I think it's even harder on our kids. So this is a picture from my years in the Obama White House, and it's a picture in the East Wing of the White House, and it's President Obama standing next to a giant iBot, and on that iBot is an Asian American woman. Her name is Alice Wong. She's a disability rights activist and recently awarded MacArthur Genius. And Alice was an appointee of President Obama's. And I remember calling Alice. I worked at the White House, and I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The American President, where he calls and she hangs up because she thinks it's a joke. When I would call from the White House, and this is just good information, anytime you get a phone call and it says 202 and nothing else, that's the White House. That's how it shows up on caller ID. I remember calling Alice to serve in the Obama administration, and she didn't answer. She thought it was a joke. I called multiple times and I was like, "Hi, is this Alice Wong?" And she was like, "Yes, why do you keep calling me?" And I said, "Because my name is Rebecca Cokley. I'm President Obama's Chief Diversity Officer, and I'm wondering if you have any interest serving in the administration." And the president has an appointment, it's a Senate confirmed appointment on the National Council on Disability, which is the chief advisor for the president and Congress on all issues related to people with disabilities. And Alice had just done a video for Asian American Heritage Month where she talked about the stigma of using a personal care attendant in her very traditional Chinese family household, and how her parents did not like her bringing a stranger in to take care of her personal care needs. And at the time, Alice was 40, and Alice is like, "Mom, I don't want you wiping my butt for forever. Like, I want to be an independent woman. I want to do my own thing." And I remember Alice saying, "I can't travel to DC to do this work." And this is like we were still in the Skype days. I don't know if anybody remembers Skype. I really wondered why Skype lost the fight in like the Zoom wars of the aughts. Um, and I remember saying, I'm like, "I'm sure we can figure this out somewhere." And so we ended up getting an iBot. And Alice drove that iBot around the White House and met Joe Biden, met President Obama, met Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and many others, because we actually took a minute to think about it. And one of the things that this always reminds me of, and this is something I said to the Inclusion Committee when we were talking about this session, is every major innovation in the field of public education has its roots in the work that y'all are doing, has its roots in the education of students with disabilities. It's amazing and it's frustrating as heck because y'all don't get lifted up as the hubs of innovation that you are. I was talking to education funders in my day job in philanthropy, and was trying to get more more education funders to fund disability. And they're like, "Yeah, we don't fund disability. We're really into individualized learning plans." And I was like, "You know where that comes from? What?" I was like, "An IEP." "Oh, yeah, yeah, that's kind of like that, but no, it's the exact same thing. I've seen what you're putting out there. Well, we're really into like positive behavioral supports for all classes." I was like, "Really? Am I being punked? Is Ashton Kutcher going to come out around the corner and tell me that this is a joke?" And it just made me so enraged that we sit here in the field of special education um, and continue to get told that we're the dumping ground, continue to be demoralized, continue to have our budgets cut, all of these things. Yet we know we're the place where innovation starts and then gets Columbused by everybody else. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge it. And it's one of the things actually when I was interviewing candidates for the Secretary of Education at the Department of Ed as part of the vetting team, it's one of the things that I asked every candidate. I was like, "Okay, so tell me how you plan on lifting up OSERS as the hub for innovation that we all know it is, that you guys just refuse to acknowledge, and how you're going to give them more money to continue doing it." They answered the first part, but not the second part. So I think so often we have to move to a framing of how, like, we know that our offices are often treated as the problem. How do we make sure that our kids aren't treated as the problem? We need to really start with thinking about like what all kids need. And this clip art in particular, a lot of the images that I use are from a group called Disabled and Here. We got really frustrated several years ago because we were looking at good photos of people with disabilities to use for slide decks. And they were all like disabled people in hospitals, or like a fakie, like an average non-disabled person in a wheelchair, like 4 sizes too big for them. And we're like, "There's no way that's a real wheel. That's not their wheelchair." Or the guy with Down syndrome that's on every Microsoft product available. And it was like, not everybody is a white young man with Down syndrome. Not that that's bad, but like literally he was like everywhere. I think it was like one of the early uses of AI in some ways. Like he just literally, like he was a glitch in the matrix. And so a number of us, like through our own money, this was before I was in the foundation space, ended up funding a number of different photo projects so we could actually get realistic photos of people with disabilities. I'm like, "I want to see people with disabilities at a party playing pool." And they're like, "Well, I don't know how we shoot that. We'll figure it out. That's not my problem. We're paying for it." I want to see people with disabilities on a date. I want to see people with disabilities at a protest. I want to see a person with a disability teaching a non-disabled person how to do something. Show me a person with a disability running a meeting. This shouldn't be rare. We're a quarter of the population. Why are we like 0.02% of clip art? Especially considering how many of the folks probably designing the clip art are also part of our community. But I do think it's really important to note that those images matter. And actually, one of the things that we're doing right now is we're funding a project with the NEA to actually create a photo bank of disabled teachers to show people with disabilities in the teaching profession, because we found that there were just literally no photos of disabled educators or apparently disabled educators. We often hear this phrase, nothing about us without us. Can anybody tell me where it came from? The flag is a clue. Does anyone know what flag that is? Your teachers. South Africa. The phrase nothing about us without us has its roots in disabled activists from South Africa that were protesting apartheid. That's actually where it came from. So when you hear other folks say it, you can be like, where does that come from? I like it when other movements use it, and I'm like, so where does that come from? Oh, I don't know, we just say it. No, it matters where it came from. This is also an example of the importance of disability history. And when we talk about history of different movements, of different communities, when we're teaching history, that we take a beat to say this was developed by disabled activists, that we take a beat to say Harriet Tubman had seizures as a result of being beaten in the head. That takes a beat to say, do you know why the Oval Office is where it is? It's because FDR didn't want to get caught in his wheelchair by the press corps. And so he moved the Oval Office from what is now called the Roosevelt Room to the Oval Office, because there was a ramp out the back that literally self-propelled him down to the residence in his wheelchair without being seen by the press. When you think about what that means to a student with a disability, to actually know that disabled people have been here and that disabled people have achieved things, it's mind-blowing. I just found out recently that there was a woman named Judy Lynn Delray who was a little person who bought the publishing rights for all the Star Wars books. I grew up knowing like little person history. I didn't know this. She was also weird and had a pet rock that she openly talked to, but that's on the documentary. You should check it out. It's on PBS. It's called Renegades. But I think about how I treasured all those books, how like when the canon expanded and I would go to the Walden books on Burlingame Avenue when it still existed. Walden books, not Burlingame Avenue. I couldn't afford to shop on Burlingame Avenue now. And all those books, and if I would have known that somebody like me was the editor-in-chief of that publishing house, how that would have shifted things for my thinking. So when we think about, transition framing, like what is it young people with disabilities need to transition to adulthood? It really does start with school, and we know that. And it talks about, it's all the things that we know: clear state standards, career and technical ed that are based on professional and industry standards, learning environments that are small and safe for everybody. But for young people with disabilities, it's using your transition plan to drive it. When we were working on presidential platforms in 2020, Cory Booker called us up and said, what can you give me that's different than what you've given everybody else? And I remember being like, how radical do you want to be, Cory Booker? And I was like, I will give you something awesome depending on the quality of the dad joke you tell me, because he tells dad jokes all the time. And he gave me a really good dad joke. Do you guys want to hear it? What is the nosiest pepper? Jalapeno, because it's jalapeno business. Now you're going to remember that joke and you're going to tell everybody. It is like the most memorable dad joke on the face of the planet. And I remember being like, oh, that's so bad, but that's so good. And so what we ended up challenging him with was, we said, what would it be like if transition planning starts not at 14, not at 16, but in the transition from elementary to middle school? And what would it look like to have kids in that space? How do you talk about the accommodations that the kids use? How do you teach them to talk about it? How do they understand how the accommodations work? Which I found really important. There were times that I would need to leave class to go to the bathroom because little person, small bladder, have to pee a lot. And we'd have a substitute, and the substitute would be like, you already went to the bathroom once, you have to wait. I'd be like, dude, are you seriously going to make me be like, I have a 504 plan and it's well doc. I was like, I don't want to be that. Nobody wants to be that. But you have to learn how to communicate those things. And I have a slide probably later in here, but I'm going to talk about it here actually. When I went to middle school at Burlingame Intermediate, I had a guidance counselor who was a double amputee. He lost his legs in Vietnam. And, you know, like I said, my parents were very activisty. They grew up, like I grew up knowing what the ADA was. I grew up knowing my right to my step stools in my classrooms and how I needed things modified and how to communicate it. And I walked into my junior high and my guidance counselor said to my mom and I, okay, Mrs. Harry, you're gonna sit out here. I'm gonna bring Rebecca in. We're gonna work on a draft of her 504 plan. And then we'll invite you in and she'll present it out to you. And then we'll talk about it collectively. Now, my parents were pretty radical by their own thinking. My mom talked about how she had never had somebody say something like that to her before. And she was like, and he's like, Rebecca's 11, does she know what her needs are? Yeah. Okay, so why don't we invite you in at the end and like we'll talk about it? Because he's like, Rebecca's gonna need to be able to talk about these things. Rebecca's gonna need to be able to present what her needs are. He's like, are you gonna be with her on every field trip? Are you going to be that mom? Are you going to call every teacher and be the teacher who, you know, that was pre everyone having email, but are you going to be the teacher that everybody like gets the emails from? They're like, I got an email from that mom. And as the disabled students coordinator at college, my mom hated that mom. And she was like, oh God, no, okay, I'll sit out here. And I remember him telling me at the end, being like, there's a reason I'm doing this. And he's like, I'm going to be honest with you. He's like, the high school guidance counselor is a real asshole. He is terrible. And you are going to have to be prepared to fight every year, every 504 plan for what you need. He is not going to have high expectations for you. And he's like, I made a point of being honest with every student I work on with their IEP and their 504, that they're in the room, and that they drive the conversation because their mom's not going to be with them every day in high school. And he is going to make their lives heck. And so you're going to need to be prepared to fight. And it was probably one of the most important, like when I think about my hero villain, like origin story moment, or like my core memory of middle school, it's both like colored denim and those conversations with Mr. Coast. But colored denim's a lot of it because I don't understand why it's coming back, if it's coming back, whatever it is. But I think about that and I think about how important that was. And my mom actually talked about how it changed her own framing because I was like, who does this man think he is to tell my daughter that he knows how to do this work when I've been like doing this? This is my job. I know how to do it. And then when she realized that I was going to the same high school, like that the high school counselor that she had that was so terrible was still there, she was like, oh. She's like, I bow down to you, Jedi Master of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Career preparation and work-based learning. You know, it really bothers me that we often don't ask kids with disabilities what they want to be when they grow up until they're like 14 or 15. Like, if you asked me when I was 6, I was kind of obsessed with LA law at 6. My mom was going back to school to get her degree. And so I stayed at my grandparents' when she was taking night classes at then College of Notre Dame in Belmont. And but I would get to stay up late on Thursday nights. And LA Law was on Thursday nights. And my mom let me watch LA Law because there was a little person actor that would show up sometimes. And he was based on a really good friend and mentor of mine and a friend of my parents, Paul Stephen Miller, who was the longest serving commissioner on the EEOC. And so my mom thought I was watching it because, oh, it's good representation. There's dwarf actors on there and they're not clowns. They're not jokes. He's a lawyer. He's Harvard educated. This is amazing. Oh no, I totally had like my first crush was Jimmy Smits as Victor Cifuentes. But that's to say, it was important that I grew up in a community where I saw little people with all different types of jobs. I knew little people that were lawyers, that were teachers. At the time, I didn't know any that were doctors. I later went on to know some that were doctors. But I think for so many young people with disabilities, like we don't have that conversation. What do you want to be when you grow up? Is there somebody with the same condition you have doing that work now or having done that work in the past? What would it be like to know that there are people like you doing that work. And I think for so many of our kids, that's never told to them. The ability to make informed choices about long-term career interests. I had a moment when I was in high school that I decided I no longer wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. We went to Ringling Brothers. And we were in the car and we were at the Cow Palace. This is how dated this is. And we're leaving the parking lot of the Cow Palace, which was its own special nightmare, to be seconded only by leaving Shoreline Amphitheater after the Bridge School benefit being its own special nightmare. And I remember saying to my mom, hey, Mom, I don't think I want to be a civil rights lawyer anymore. I think I want to be a clown. My mom slammed on the brakes of our Honda Civic so hard that my head, even though I had my seatbelt on, hit the dashboard. And she was like, what? And I was like, I think I want to be a clown. She was in her master's program at the time, and she went to her master's cohort, and she was like, I'm in complete crisis. I have totally failed as a mom. And they're like, what? And she's like, Rebecca wants to be a clown. And they were like, she's 12, who cares? And she's like, no, her father and I have spent our entire lives being like, you have to change the world. You have to make the world a better place for people like us. Like, go forth and make things happen. And she wants to be a freaking clown. What am I supposed to do here? And one of her friends said, well, then you better make sure she's the best damn clown possible. And this is like early days of the internet. So my mom did not talk to me for like a week. I remember being like, oh, this is worse than when I had like a $300 phone bill from Pacific Bell after a Little People convention and I hid it in the couch and she found it. I thought I was so dead. And then she comes in with this giant packet and it's from Cirque du Soleil. And it's about Cirque du Soleil's University of Clown Studies. My mom sat down and threw it in front of me and said, if you're going to be a clown, you're going to be the damn best clown. We're not doing Ringling Brothers, no Pickle Family Circus, none of these, we're not doing it. We're at Cirque du Soleil or bust. And I was like, did you ever think to ask me why I wanted to be a clown? And she said, no. And I said, because you get to travel the world. I was like, it's not about the makeup and making an ass of yourself as a little person. I was like, honestly, you'd make more money doing that as a lawyer. But it's about traveling the world. And she was like, oh, okay. And she was like, she jumped to conclusions based on what she thought I was saying. And so I think so many times for young people with disabilities, we're prone to doing that. And we're also prone to saying, oh, no, you can't do that. And then it's a mix of freedom to fail, not allowing students with disabilities the freedom to make a mistake, and then also not being willing to sit and peel back the onion and say, so why do you want to do that? What do you want to do? And for students with disabilities, it's about understanding how to accommodate for your disability in the workplace. When I worked at Victoria's Secret, and I interviewed for that job, the store manager, I didn't know at the time, but she had grown up next door to a family of little people in Oregon that I knew. And so sort of first hurdle overcome. She's not freaked out by people like me. But then she freaked out because she thought she was going to have to lower every rack in that store. And I was like, no, I just need a step stool. And she's like, what? I was like, the Rubbermaid stools at Walgreens, they're at that time probably $7.99. I was like, I need a step stool in every room, and one in the back. And she's like, that's it? And I'm like, yeah, because most accommodations we know cost less than $200. But if we don't teach our young people how to ask for those accommodations or what they are, and that also doesn't mean the conversation doesn't get any less scary, because it is scary sometimes to ask for an accommodation. And it's not one of those things that changes as you get older. I'll be honest, I have faced discrimination in every job I have ever had. I remember being at the White House and somebody coming in and saying, a civil rights CEO of a major civil rights organization coming in to meet with me as the president's diversity officer and saying, oh my gosh, you're the cutest thing on the face of the planet. Did you get your job through, are you volunteering here as are you a Special Olympian? And this was a big name person. This is a person you see on TV quite regularly. And I remember having the what I call the Bugs Bunny reaction from the old Warner Brothers cartoon where the devil pops up on one shoulder and is like, who is this person? Does he understand that I am the chief diversity officer for the first Black president? I worked the campaign. I wrote platforms. I knocked doors. Like, he can kiss my beep. The other being like the angel being like, oh, just take it. Just ignore it. Like, you don't want to be, you're already visible enough. You don't want the headlines to be like, angry little person throws well-tenured civil rights activist out of the White House for, asking her if she got a participation trophy. And I remember being like, okay, where's the middle? Where's the middle? Oh my God. And meanwhile, all my office mates have turned around to watch me have this conversation. They're like, oh, this is going to be good. And I remember saying, we don't use that language. I worked on the campaign from day one. I helped create the first disability caucus on a presidential campaign that was led by disabled people. I worked streets in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and in South Carolina. Like, I did what everybody else did to get here. And Special Olympians are awesome in their own right, and not all of us are Special Olympians, and we don't need to be. But that doesn't mean the conversation gets any easier. And one of the things I always get asked by young people, they're like, so does it get easier? Do you still get made fun of? Yeah, I do. I have bad dwarf days. It happens. There have been times in a job where I asked for a little laptop. I was like, I want a small laptop, when I started a job. And I'm like 11-inch MacBook. I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm still a Mac person. And they're like, but why? And I was like, okay. So I took a picture of my hands and I sent it to them next to a ruler. And I was like, tiny hands. And I was like, are you kidding me? You hired me to do this job and you're going to ask me why I need the laptop I need. When our office returned to office, which is its own act of violent ableism that I think a lot of people feel in the disability community, because it was great to watch non-disabled people, Columbus, telework, and then just as quickly be like, oh, but it doesn't exist anymore. We've just asked for it for 30 years. And I remember actually sitting with a congresswoman. I was sitting with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. And I was like, AP, I need to go in and tell them that I can't be in the office 3 days a week. It's too hard on my joints. And she was like, okay, so go do that. And I was like, I'm scared. And I've known my boss for 20 years. I knew her before. We both worked at the Ford Foundation. I was recruited by the Ford Foundation to do this specific work. And she looked at me and she was like, you're scared? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, at this point in your career, shouldn't you not be scared anymore? And I'm like, and she's like, let me take that back. It actually means more about the fact that you have to be scared. And I think for so many folks with disabilities, regardless of how old you are, regardless of your degrees, the career path that you've had, the very act of asking for accommodations is scary. And I think thinking about how do we debunk that for our young people so that when they leave school and they go into the world of work, they might still feel scared, because let's be real, ableism is a thing. But they'll be prepared and they'll be confident in that ask. In the youth development space, we often talk about peer-to-peer mentoring. And by peer-to-peer, I mean disabled people mentoring disabled people. I feel some sort of way. A lot of times we see these programs where it's like, be nice to the disabled kid for the day. I hated that. It was up there with, there's another disabled kid. You guys have totally different disabilities. And the teacher would be like, I want you two to be friends. That forced intimacy is not cool. The person they made me be friends with was really mean, and it happened at 3 successive schools. And finally by high school, I was like, I am not gonna be friends with her. She is not nice. Saw her at the reunion, she is still not nice. Talking about self-advocacy and conflict resolution, I had to shoot off an email to my son's school this morning because he came home with a really random bruise that some kid gave him in PE, some kid that's twice his height. And I sent a note I was like, are you going to talk about it to your house teacher? Well, I don't know. And I was like, okay, you know what? This is a self-advocacy moment. You have 2 hours. If you don't talk to him, I'm going to get to him before you do. Here's the challenge. Do you want mom to talk to him, or do you want to talk to him? And so sometimes self-advocacy needs a little bit of help. Mentors and role models, like I said, being exposed to people with disabilities that have similar interests to you, adults with disabilities, and an understanding of disability history and culture. Can anyone tell me the first book that came out in Braille the same day it came out in print? Nobody? Nobody? Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. And it was because blind kids showed up and shut down Scholastic's publishing headquarters because they were pissed about spoilers. They were mad that when the previous book came out, there was stuff that was revealed that all their friends that were not blind, that did not use Braille, were like, oh, did you know that blah, 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 blah. And so we think that we've come so far. That's not even that, I mean, let's be real, that's not that long ago. But the fact that we are still struggling to make sure our kids have access to the same curriculum at the same time, that to me is an important moment of disability history. And yet now, how many people listen to books on tapes? Or like Audible and things like that. Like I want to actually, I have it in my phone. I have the sound file from Maui singing "You're Welcome" from Moana. And that's what I like to say is like the disability community anthem, because there's so much stuff that we fought for that non-disabled people use and don't think about it. And it's like captioning. What can I say except you're welcome? Curb cuts. That's one of ours too. Four-wheeled suitcases. That's us. Audible. That's us. Voice to text directions. That's ours too. So when you don't get lost, thank a disabled person. And yet we continue to talk about disability like it's a bad thing. You know, and then the last piece that we really talk about is connecting activities. For kids with disabilities, it's like, what are the things that you need to be connected to? Because we honestly couldn't think of a better framing for it. And it was like transportation services, housing, you know, over a third of Section 8, well, let's see. There is no current database for Section 8 housing that tracks how many of those units are accessible, and there is no legal mandate that requires they go to families that have access needs before they go to families that don't need accessible units. So over 2/3 of Section 8 accessible units are being lived in by people who do not have disability needs. Access to tutoring. I have to call and schedule a tutor for my daughter right now because she's decided math isn't fun. Financial planning and management. This is a huge piece for students with disabilities. Right now, if you're on Medicaid, you can't have more than $2,000 in a bank account or you lose your Medicaid. You can't get married if you're disabled and you're on Medicaid without losing your Medicaid. If you've worked a job and have saved up, like I had a 403B from Victoria's Secret, and you need Medicaid, you have to spend that down in order to access Medicaid. If you acquire a disability and you're already married, you could be forced to get divorced to access healthcare. The disability community, from as early as the first disability employment law, which was passed right after the Civil War, has been set up by law to be forced to live in poverty. And most young people don't understand the implications of that. I got reached out to by a young person recently who was trying to save for a new wheelchair, because on Medicaid, you only get a new wheelchair every 7 years. So we expect the 7-year-old to use the same wheelchair as a 13-year-old. Now that might work for my people, but for your people, like the averages, like y'all grow. I couldn't imagine, like, I mean, it's bad enough to see like little kids in giant wheelchairs in the bad clip art, but to see like a 13-year-old using like a little like chair with like Paw Patrol on it, like that would be mortifying. And so this kid reached out to me and said, Becca, I'm setting up a GoFundMe account to fundraise for a wheelchair. Now, first off, 2/3 of GoFundMes and crowdfunding are being used specifically to fund an uninsured disability-related expense. I had to tell him he couldn't set up a GoFundMe because he would lose his Medicaid. And he's like, so I have to still use this like Paw Patrol wheelchair until it gets approved? And I was like, yeah, dude, sucks. Like that's the world we live in. And that's actually, there's bipartisan legislation right now that's moving in the House and the Senate that will actually change it and allow people to have, an individual to have up to $10,000 and a family to be able to have up to 30. Which will allow people to be able to marry without losing their Medicaid, and will allow people to be able to keep any retirement savings. This would lift over 300,000 disabled people in this country out of poverty if it were to pass. But that financial management piece is really real and isn't something we talk about. Mental and physical health services for everybody. It says youth with disabilities need, everybody needs it. I think if there was anything we saw out of the pandemic, we've seen a shifting in stigma around mental health. And we need to continue to see that shift happen. And just general physical health services. I'm 45. Does anybody know what happens when you're 45? One of the fun things you have to do when you're 45? Colonoscopy time. That's what I'm doing at the end of this week. But I've talked to my disabled friends and they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you're 45, you got to get a colonoscopy. No, nobody told me that. Well, have you gotten a mammogram? No, because I don't know where I can go and get a machine that's going to work with me. And when you think about the level of, like, people don't tell disabled people this. They think you only need to know about the regular, like the things that are specific to your disability. And yet we know that there's an extremely high rate of death among people with disabilities that aren't able to access preventative care. And because people don't talk to them about it. And it starts when you're young. Transportation, tutoring, etc., all those good things. Family involvement and supports. You need supportive families. I know families can be a pain in the butt, but turn those moms to work for you. Welcome them into your inner sanctum. Don't have enough money for something? Have them call the district. What would it be like if they were on your team? That's what I tell my kids' teachers all the time. I'm like, so what do you need? And they're like, what? I'm like, what can I do for you? Do you need phone calls made? Do you need extra money for book fair? Like, what can I be the pain in the butt parent calling the district saying this classroom needs X? I'm more than willing to do that. I like doing that. You know, a lot of times parents will center themselves as the advocate and won't center the young person. That's a thing that happens. And I think I like to remind them, like, so what's going to happen when your kid goes off to college? They're not going to know what they need. And so continuing to encourage and be supportive as family members, supporting the young person taking the driver's seat, and engaging in an active role in their transition. Okay, one slide wasn't on here that I was actually going to share. I think it's because I I redid my slide deck at midnight. How many people have done that before and been like, oh, I forgot that one thing? I had a picture of myself in conversation with an advocate whose name is Ziamara. And Ziamara, her mom founded an organization during the 2017 healthcare fights when disabled people are responsible for the preservation of the Affordable Care Act, because literally our folks were dragged from their wheelchairs in the Capitol fighting to save the ACA. And Ziamara is a badass. She is my daughter's age, so she's 11. She knows everything, or at least she thinks she does. Actually, she probably does. And I remember when she first started going to school in person after the pandemic. And Ziamara has a trach and has multiple disabilities. And when she was born, they strongly pushed her parents to institutionalize her, and they didn't. And they gave her a name so long so she would have to learn to write it. And they were like, you got to stick around, kid, so you got to write this really long name. And I remember Ziamara calling me one day. They were in the car, and they had gone to a playground, and the playground wasn't accessible. And the school had said, well, we don't think Ziamara knows how to advocate for herself. So her mom calls me, and we're talking about like how the IEP meeting went. And I hear Ziamara in the back, and I'll be totally honest with you. And she told me, I actually called her last night and was like, can I tell this story about you? Because I think often kids with disabilities have their stories told about them and don't have the right to choose whether or not they tell their story. Like my son refused to let me write a blog about an incident that he went through one time. And so I'm very much like of the mind that I won't tell a story unless the kid says it's okay. And so I was like, Ziamara, how is the playground? And she was probably 7 at the time. And she was like, it's a bullshit playground. And I was like, what? And she's like, it's a bullshit playground out, Becca. And I was like, why? And she's like, they said it was all accessible and I couldn't go on the swing. There was no swing for my wheelchair. And there was there was a trail, but it was like too bumpy and not paved, and I couldn't do that. And there was a merry-go-round and I couldn't get on it. Like, she's like, we drove an hour and a half for it. She's like, Mom drove an hour and a half listening to Lionel Richie the entire way down 95 to go to this bullshit playground. And I was like, okay, so what would have made it better? And so she like laid it out. And I remember saying to her mom, like, tell her she needs to go into her IEP meetings like she went in talking about the playground without the bullshit. I'm like, she knows what's wrong. She knows what she can't access. And actually then use that to frame the conversation around, okay, so what do we need to change? Ziamara says she can't reach the water table. So do we either move the water down to her or do we switch what table it's on? Like Ziamara said that she couldn't use more than the bottom 6 inches of the chalkboard, which actually made me laugh because actually the first time my mom was up for tenure in San Mateo County, she was denied tenure based on the fact that she could only use the bottom 6 inches of a chalkboard. I mean, who uses a chalkboard now? And that was before the ADA. And I remember they said the same thing with Ziamara. Well, Ziamara won't go up to the board and do problems. I'm like, Ziamara, why aren't you going up to the board to do problems? I can't reach it. Okay, so they didn't think to like change it. She's like, nope. It was like, all right, this is how we're gonna frame the conversation going forward. And we're gonna frame it more into like solutions versus problems. Let's think about all the problems that you have and come to the table with the solutions from the beginning. And now I think the school district's pretty scared of her. Because literally she writes lists all day long and is like, this doesn't work for me, so we need to do this differently. But I think so many times, like I think about how she was assumed to not ever have a voice. She was assumed to, that adults could just talk about her and like in the abstract and not have to actually engage directly with her. And yeah, I mean, anytime I see an accessible playground, I'm like, oh, it's a bullshit playground. Like, and now you're going to do it. Anytime you look at a playground, you're like, could kids with disabilities play here? No, it's a bullshit playground. Why are we making playgrounds that kids with disabilities can't engage in? It's a bullshit playground. That's actually going to be how I retitle this presentation going forward. It's a bullshit playground. But I wanted to take as I'm wrapping up, I want to take the time to answer questions. What questions do you all have? And mind you, I have children and have spoken to elementary schools, so there's not a question I have not been asked.
We also have Rebecca Cokley. I forgot to mention hi to our virtual audience.
Hi, virtual audience.
Hi, everyone. Say hi to our virtual audience that I failed to welcome them. So if they have questions as well, just let me know, Susan.
Y'all have no questions?
Oh,
So Rebecca, what did you do as a child to become your own advocate?
I think honestly, a lot of it was being in a really supportive school, and my parents, like I was part of my 504 plan starting in kindergarten. My principal, my teachers, and my parents were like, we're not going to have this conversation about you without you in the room. And we don't know what's working for you and what isn't. You're the best judge of that. And so like knowing that I would have to start talking about those sorts of things. I also think when I was in kindergarten, I had to have my legs straightened. So I was in a 40-pound plaster Paris cast from the waist down for like 8 weeks. And my grandparents said that's where I got over my fear of telling adults what to do. Because when you can't move, it would be like, hey, can you go get me this? Hey, I need this. Hey, but it's your grandparents. And you don't just talk to your grandparents like that. You have to do it respectfully and politely, especially because mine are like old Irish people and they would not have tolerated anything less. And so learning to like ask for things, ask for what you needed, etc. But I also think having parents and educators that asked me what would work best. I remember my guidance counselor, I remember Mr. Coase suggesting that he was the first person to suggest, because we had some new textbooks, but there was always those older versions of the textbook that some kid had that had practically destroyed the year before. And I remember him knowing that they were going to have to damage those ones out. And I remember him saying to me, well, why don't we take them to the shop class and have the shop teacher saw off the binding and we'll hole punch them. and put them into like in a binder with dividers. So you only need to bring the section, not even a second set of books, but you only need to bring the section that you're working on to class. And I remember being like, oh wow, like this guy's got ideas. Like, and that was a big piece of it too, was watching other disabled people. Because he talked about how like he was like, yeah, when I was getting my master's, we have to buy our books. So he's like, I brought him into the shop class and asked the shop teacher to saw off the bindings and hole punch him. So I wasn't gonna, he's like, as a double amputee, he's like, A, having that much weight on my prosthetics wasn't really good. It wasn't good on my back. And so I think part of it was also like what we call like crip knowledge, like watching what other disabled people do and being like, oh, that's awesome. I never thought of it that way. Like that's really cool. I think there was one back here somewhere. Yeah. Let's get you the mic so we're accessible.
Hello, thank you for speaking with us today and being who you are, advocating for our students. My question is, as a parent or an educator to a student that has very mild disabilities, is it a better skill to teach them to innovate for themselves on a daily basis or to advocate, self-advocate to others to help them? Does
I
that
think
make
every
sense?
kid should be taught to self-advocate. I think every kid has the ability. Like the whole mild to severe disability conversation, that's also something that like non-disabled people came up with. We don't do that. And so people will look at me and be like, you're not disabled, you're just short. And you know, people often don't realize that, like, frankly, and I didn't say this when I came in, I usually do, my most disabling condition is my migraines. I have epic migraines, like head in the toilet bowl like you were drinking in college, like 3 or 4 days in a dark room with an ice pack and drinking Mexican Coca-Cola because the caffeine count in that is better than domestic Coca-Cola, and the sugar is better than the whatever they process they put in it now. Um, and so people will often assume, people will be like, what's your migraine? Like, oh, you just have headaches, you know? And I think for so many people, like when society tells us that our disability is mild or is severe, like that creates thinking, internalized thinking in our own heads, where it's like, oh, you know, because you can't see my migraines, they're not, like I used to not talk about them. Because I'm like, oh, they're not that big of a deal. Like if I walk into a room and I'm presenting, nobody sees them. But yet, when you know that like 40% of women in this country live with migraines, and we were told that it was all in our head and that it was likely tied into our menstrual cycle, not the fact that we actually have migraines, and that's a debilitating condition. That I think that, you know, it does something to kids. I think all kids should be taught to self-advocate from as early an age as possible. If you can say that you don't want to watch Paw Patrol and instead you want to watch Phineas and Ferb, that's an act of advocacy. I don't like Paw Patrol either. I don't like, but I have my own reasons. But like I do think that there is like all kids with disabilities, A, they should know they're disabled, B, they should be taught about their accommodations, and C, they should be encouraged to advocate for their needs.
Hello, thank you for sharing everything, all your stories. My name's Megan, and my question is currently in my district site, students aren't included in their IEP meetings or 504 plans. And so I'm wondering, how would you suggest that an educator like me or educators like me?
I would ask in the IEP meeting or the 504, at what point are we going to include so-and-so in this conversation because they need to learn how to advocate for themselves?
Yeah. And what if we get pushback? What do we do then?
You ask the kid. Say, we're having a you know, or just harmlessly, are you going to be in the meeting that we're having on Tuesday where we talk about your hopes and dreams and your very existence on this planet? You're not? Oh, my bad. I mean, I think that there's like, there's plenty of like, you know, school educators like the research. There's research out there that shows the positive benefits of students with disabilities being involved in their IEP. I just read this really interesting paper by Dr. Anjali Forber-Pratt that talks about the importance of students with disabilities being involved in their IEP in terms of their long-term career development. This is innovation. We should think about this.
And then would you have them join as early as like elementary school, kindergarten, PK? Okay.
I think the earlier the better. I think kindergarten, and yeah, they might be sitting there coloring or playing at a station or doing something, but they're present for a conversation that has to do about them and their choices and what they want to do. And you might, we ended up finding out when my son was in his 504 plan in kindergarten, like they had one of those rooms where there was a little bathroom inside the kindergarten classroom, that the toilets didn't work for him. We wouldn't have known that if he wasn't in the room, because we probably wouldn't have checked it out. And so I do think there is a real value. My husband is legally blind, and never had an IEP or a 504 plan, because he grew up in South Carolina, where South Carolina only advocates for a minimally adequate public education for all students, which is actually in their state charter. South Carolina. Yay, New Jersey! New Jersey's awesome. And so he used to have to try to advocate on his own to sit up closer the board. And he didn't have any paperwork to document it. And so there were teachers many times that were like, yeah, no. And his mom was so afraid that if they fought for an IEP or a 504 plan, they're like, the state that we're in, he's an African-American kid with a disability in South Carolina. He's not going to make it out. And he talks frequently about how he wishes there would have been a conversation that he could have actually been able to say like what he needed, because it always made the conversation way more awkward. And he was always treated like he was a burden in trying to advocate for the needs that he had.
Hello, my name is Michelle Caprietti, and South Carolina will rival Arizona. Is going to fight for the bottom of the barrel. Yes, race to the bottom.
Mississippi, I think, too, and they're just going.
I mean, and I moved here specifically because I do have a son with a cognitive impairment, severe cognitive impairment, and autism. And I thought I moved, for all the right reasons, which I still believe I do. But in listening to your conversation, he turned 19. And I thought I had done everything possible to get us ready for that. Started many, many, many years ago, moved here, thanks to my lovely team who hired me to move here. Moved back and forth for 2 years, led him to finish. He turned 19, we moved here. I got his Social Security check for $600 and said, good luck and best wishes, function. How do we get involved? Because in California, there's privilege that does not, that I know. That in Arizona, he didn't even have the right to vote. When I moved here and we started working with his case manager, like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, he's conserved. Well, that doesn't matter. So these, the
number one reason people with disabilities fight conservatorship actually is for the right to vote.
Right. And here in California, you can vote, which he's so excited. He's got his ballot ready to go. But in Arizona, you can't vote. But even in Arizona or California, you can't live on $635 a month. And if he works, that money is taken away from.
Yeah.
So we got to make more than that $635. And then we've got that $2,000 that you talk about that I'm constantly like,
it's terrifying.
Move this money.
When they gave out the stipend checks during the pandemic, people lost their benefits.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get
set up to stack.
Well, we went through that because we had back pay. So my question is, how do we start? You said there's some bipartisan legislation, the right to marry. Him and his girlfriend would love to get married. That's not a reality for us. He's 19. I'm just like, maybe we could have a ceremony and fake it, but you can't get married. These things are still existing and it's 2024.
Yeah.
And I worry a lot with the election 14 days away. Sorry, I'm trying not to cry. That will go backwards. So what do I do?
I think there is no more powerful force than a room full of angry parents. There really isn't. And I think organizing parents, California has a lot of disability infrastructure. You have centers for independent living, you have DD councils, you have ARC chapters, People First chapters, et cetera. So much of the progress made in the disability rights community started in California. And so I think it is organizing. I think it's pushing for systems to shift. I think it's, we see guardianship Bill of Rights bill was introduced, I think, last year in Congress. Nothing's been moving at all in Congress. So like it's introduced, it's probably not going to go anywhere right now. But there is like shifts for change. I mean, I do think like figuring out ways to organize, to push referendums, to push for increased supports and services. I mean, 19 is so hard because, we have all these transition cliffs. I mean, if, you can be still receiving services in school at 22, but if you're in foster care and disabled, you're thrown out of housing at 18. You're having your benefits redetermined at 18. All of these different systems are set up in such a way to intentionally keep people poor and intentionally keeping people out of power. I think, organizations like the Disability Rights and Education Defense Fund in Berkeley is one of the strongest organizations anywhere in the country, let alone California. They're doing a lot of work in this space. I would suggest getting involved with them. For young people, looking at groups like the State Youth Leadership Forum in Sacramento, Yo Disabled and Proud, which is another group of young leaders with disabilities in Sacramento, that get together for about a week every year and do self-advocacy work, do peer support work, do organizing work for back in their local communities. The system has to change, and we have to push for the change that we need. I mean, I think one of the other big fears on the education front, I'll be real, is they continue to flirt with the idea of opening up IDEA. I'm really scared of opening up IDEA right now. Given where Congress is right now, somebody else was like, well, let's open up the ADA. No, we're not opening any of these things. I have now, from being like the young, rebellious, like, yes, we're going to open it up. We're going to make great changes. I'm like, no, we're not touching it. Like, put it back. Do not touch. I do think, honestly, I think one of the most transformative things has been a growing number of people with disabilities running for office and being in state and federal legislatures, because they're people who've come through the system, and are advocating for change. But I do think it's like getting onto school boards, pushing for local advocacy efforts. We've seen some really positive things happen in California. We've also seen some really challenging things happen in California. And so, yeah, connecting with groups like the Protection and Advocacy Network, the Parent Training and Information Centers, the infrastructure that's already out there. Folks are moving on things, and making sure your voices are at the table.
Rebecca, there's a question from our virtual audience, Zunika, and you touched on it a little bit, but she asked, what advice would you give a parent or of children with disabilities to encourage self-advocacy? It's such a struggle letting go.
I've seen what happens when parents don't let go. I've watched, I had a friend whose parents always advocated for her, and they told her she was no longer going to be disabled when she turned 18. I don't know what kind of magic 8-ball they had. She woke up at 18 and rolled out of bed thinking she was going to walk. She broke her femur. That is not walking. I think so many times it really is around the stigma of disability. And also as a parent, you want to be out there fighting for your kid, taking on the battle so they don't have to. As someone, my dad passed when I was 10, my mom passed when I was 25. And I am so thankful for the fact that my parents taught me about my disability, talked to me about my disability, made sure I understood how to communicate about my accommodations and my disability related needs. Because I've met people in my organization who are in their 40s and 50s and have realized, found out that they always had an ADHD diagnosis, but their parents never told them. And they're like, I wonder why I've bombed every job I've been in. I wonder why I'm the guy who when I raise my hand in a meeting, everyone's like, oh. And he's like, it's because I have ADHD and I'm unmedicated and I should be on meds. And my parents never told me because they didn't want me to feel bad for myself. And I think that's been one of the most interesting things. One of the things that I saw during the pandemic was more adults with disabilities start to self-identify Like they went and got tested and found, oh, I'm autistic. Oh, I have ADHD. You know, I'm struggling with my mental health right now. And talk about that experience and about how liberating it was to know that it wasn't something in their head, it wasn't something that they had made up, it wasn't them operating with lower expectations for themselves, but it was very real. And once they got the accommodations they needed, it was a game changer, you know. And like that coworker I was telling the story about, it was somebody I worked with in a previous job, where every time this person raised their hand, I was like, oh my God, are we gonna have? We're on slide 30. Are we gonna have to go back to 30 to slide 1 to catch this person up? And then when I realized, I was like, oh no, they're just one of my people. Okay, I need to think of instead about how am I accommodating them. They don't realize I'm accommodating them, but I know I'm accommodating them. And then a few weeks later, we were at a meeting and they came up, and we were in one of those like late work meetings where everyone's like, well, let's break for drinks and then we'll get back together at 8 o'clock and keep working on this problem. And I looked at this coworker and I could tell, oh, they are not going to be here at 8 o'clock. They are over processed, overstimulated. They are like a Thanksgiving turkey and it's the Butterball hotline. Like they're done. And I remember being like, you know what? Why don't we just kill it for the night? We're all dead. We're all tired. We'll come back in tomorrow with fresh heads, food in our bellies, and we'll go from there. And I remember him pulling me aside and being like, thank you so much. And I was like, what? He's like, you did that for me, didn't you? And I was like, I did it for all of us, but yeah, I did it for you also. I was like, because I really didn't want to come back and meet with these people at 8 o'clock. And he was like, I just can't absorb anything else. And I was like, I thought that might be the case. And I didn't want to be like, you're one of my people, but you're one of my people. And so now like thinking about how we organize things for the rest of my time in that job in such a way that accommodated him. And also, frankly, we know that when you accommodate students with disabilities and people with disabilities, it's that Maui song. It's the what can I say except you're welcome, because it makes things more accommodating for everybody.
Okay, I think we have time for one more. Is that okay?
Yeah.
One or two more? Okay.
Hello, thank you for your presentation today. I have a question that's kind of building off the previous one, which is like, I'm a 4th grade teacher, and I have a student this year who we're working on self-advocacy, but her parents are not supportive of that.
Yeah.
They kind of just have very low expectations for her for the rest of her life. And I'm like, I can see I can see where you can go. And I'm wondering, like, how do I talk to these parents and be like, no, you also need to teach her how to self-advocate and to teach her how to have higher, she can do it. I don't even know how to begin having. I'm not a parent, so how do I even talk to them about that?
Oh, you're going to be the evil teacher that plants the seeds of deviance and revolution in the child. Welcome. We've been waiting for everybody. Give her a round of applause. Yes. Hell yes. Be that teacher. I think part of it is like working on self-advocacy in the classroom. And then lovingly encourage her when she does it well. To think about the other places in her life that might be helpful. Because all it takes is like I was working with a group of young people with intellectual disabilities. And I remember we were talking about what they all wanted to be when they grew up. And we were working on a campaign to have disability history required as part of K-12 public education in the state of Florida. This was back in the day. Love the laughs. Yeah, Florida's on that list too. And I remember a mom calling me and being like, how dare you tell my child that they can have a job someday? She can't have a job. She can't do anything. I'm like, she literally just wrote legislative language. Like she offered ideas that we then put into the language for this bill that we're all collectively working on. Part of it for me was tapping other moms. Because I also realized, and at the time I was doing this work, I was 25 and I didn't have kids. I didn't speak mom. I realized, now looking back, I was like, oh, you sweet summer child, you don't speak mom. And so I reached out to a couple of mom mentors I knew. And I suggested that they take that mom for a glass of wine. I was like, when was the last time that mom was probably taken out for a drink? When was the last time that mom went out with friends? Probably not frequently. And so, I would suggest even connecting with the local parent training and information center as a teacher and reaching out and saying, hey, there's this family. I think they could benefit with some supports. Could we set up a time for y'all to connect? Because the first thing they're going to say is, oh, my kid's nothing like those kids. No, honey, your kids are more alike than you realize. But having other parents be part of the, like having a group of professional other parents who like, this is what the organization, the PTI does, be tapped is always helpful.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Shira Barnes. I'm from Eastside, represent.
Woo! Anybody from the east of anywhere always does that. Like, you get East Jersey, you get East Brooklyn, like East Texas, anywhere I go, they're like, I'm from East. Oh, here it comes.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible to be in a room filled with people that are speaking a really similar language.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, we are the only people in a room speaking this language, and that work can be exhausting and taxing and all of the things. So my question for you is this: how do you keep your motivation when so many of these conversations, you walk out of a room and you're like, I just wasted an hour of my life talking to some dumbasses, because like we can't do basic stuff for basic people. Why do we have
there's
to
a great
fight?
meme that says you can't do epic stuff with basic people. It's not stuff, but it says like you can't do epic S with basic people. Yes. It's hard.
How do you keep energized?
I'm gonna be totally honest. Playlists.
Okay.
Like motivational playlists, like playlists of badassery. I strongly suggest, like, honestly, I still will pull out like the Top Gun soundtrack, like the 80s Top Gun, not this new Top Gun. Like, give me some Kenny Loggins Danger Zone before I go into a meeting. Some Beyonce Survivor. You know, like honestly, I'm a big fan of the motivational playlist. I am not a crafty person. Like I can't sew. And as a little person, that's like a cardinal sin. That means you're paying for alterations. Because this is called the crypt tax. We pay twice as much for our clothes as y'all do because everything has to be fitted. It sucks. But I can build Lego.
All right.
And the Lego piece for me, like the building of Lego, is my mental health break. It has a fixed beginning, a middle, and an end. So like I know when I've accomplished something, then I put it up on the shelf and everybody assumes they're my husband's. And I'm like, no, those are mine and you're not allowed to touch it. You know, finding the thing, like I think a lot of times we'll deprive ourselves of basic things if we feel like we haven't had a win. Like I went through a phase where I realized that none of my disabled women friends were eating lunch. And I kind of became Twitter famous because I tweeted about lunch every day for like 5 years before Twitter was evil. And I would literally be like, because I had this week where I got to the end of the week and I realized I hadn't eaten lunch all week. And I texted like 3 of my girlfriends and I was like, hey, did y'all eat lunch? Because it was like, we had like 3 conferences that week. And everybody's like, no, we didn't eat lunch. And I was like, this is a problem. I hadn't done enough. I had one more meeting to go. Oh, that meeting went really sucky. I needed to sit and process it instead of freaking putting food in my body. And I was like, this is a problem. And so I started eating lunch every day and tweeting about it and being like, hey guys, it's lunchtime. Today in my lunchbox, I have like X, A, B, and C. Like, what are y'all eating? And like people on the internet used to send me what they were eating for lunch every day. And what struck me was there was a week where the week that we moved to New Jersey, our movers quit the first day. It was a whole mess. We had to hire new. It was just such a thing. And I got to the end of the week and I hadn't tweeted about lunch all week. I got to that Friday and my husband and I were in the car going to Target to buy the stuff that we didn't have for the new house. And my phone rang and it was Capitol Hill. I'll never forget this. It was Senator Elizabeth Warren, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and Congresswoman Katie Porter. And they're like, hey, we're all on the phone for you. And I was like, oh my God, what's wrong? What's going on? Are you guys okay? Yeah, we're fine. Like, we're going to Target to get a plunger. Like, what's up? You didn't tweet it. We're worried because you haven't tweeted about lunch all week. And I was like, we've been moving? And they're like, oh. And then Katie's like, yeah, I totally, like, we used your lunch tweet to remind us to send our staff to lunch. And I was like, what? And they're like, our staff were like, well, when are we going to lunch? Is it lunchtime? And they're like, and then we realized, we're like, Cokley hasn't tweeted about lunch. And it was like the funniest thing. But I realized that, like, in the work that we do, we will hold our basic needs back from ourselves if we feel like we're not deserving or we haven't done enough. And it's a real problem. Like saying I'm not going to eat lunch because like I had a bad meeting or I have one more thing, that paperwork's going to be there after lunch. It's likely going to be there the next morning. And so I really encourage you all, like, and in the joy piece, the part about centering joy, the most important thing that you all can't do is like use that joy as a cudgel and pull it away when you don't think you've done enough. Like that is like the ultimate no-no. And I think so many times like we feel like if we haven't done enough or we haven't given 110%. That's the other thing. What really bothers me is that to be an expert in special education or the education issues facing students with disabilities, you have to know everything about non-disabled kids and then have this bonus piece around students with disabilities. And people don't often realize that that educators in this space are more qualified than general ed teachers. It's like the big secret. And it bothers me because they're not compensated that way. Just like architects that work on accessible housing, you have to know everything about housing code and the disability piece. It's like the cherry on top that you don't get paid for. And we really don't talk enough about like how quick we are to deprive ourselves of basic things. And don't deprive yourself. Buy the Lego, get the cherry on top of the sundae. Like sneak out and like get the trashy novel, read the crappy book. There's a lot of crappy books. Like, read for fun. Go see a movie. Go watch John Wick 7 or Fast and the Furious 23. I'm like, why have you not brought the guys from Chips into Fast and the Furious? As a kid from California, I'm really dying to see Eric Estrada like hang out with Vin Diesel. Like those are my trashy movies. I'm like, oh, they're just gonna run around in cars, and I have no idea. And if I fall asleep, the next one's gonna come on. And you know what? I'm gonna wake up. They're still running around in cars. It's awesome. Yeah, don't deprive yourself of basic things. You deserve the good stuff.